My name is Matt Hutton. I'm an engineer by training and have some experience with a small business that did a lot of work for the federal and the state governments. Um, I still am a practicing engineer and have been working with the SBDC and other small business oriented um, organizations throughout the state since about 2017. So, helping quite a few folks look for federal grants um, and apply for federal and state funding. I'm going to focus today on SBIRs. That is kind of the vehicle that the government uses, the federal government, for small business oriented and technologies that are meant to be commercialized. Um, it doesn't need to be exclusive, so I can touch on other federal grants and um, please let me know if there's anything specific you'd like to hear more about. Um, this is, your time. So I'll kind of start and focus on SBIRs, as I said, but yeah, we can drift off into any other topics that are helpful for you, or you can follow up with me later if you'd like to. All right. So a little bit about the SBIR program. SBIR stands for Small Business Innovation Research. And this is a program that was started by an act of Congress in the early 80s. And it was applied to all the executive branch agencies. So the Environmental Protection Agency, the Department of Defense, the National Institutes of Health, and so forth. Um, any of those agencies that had an extramural research budget at the time, meaning that they were funding research out throughout the country, were enrolled kind of into the SBIR program. And that required them at the time to spend a portion of their research dollars on small businesses that were innovating in their sort of technical domain. Um, so the purpose of that at the time was really to get an innovation economy developed around all these different areas of technology. Um, and that remains today. There are now 11 agencies that participate. I think it's a very well attended program. As you'll see, I'll go through some numbers. And again, it tends to be the first stop for a lot of applicants. There are many different types of grants you can apply for. But if you have a small business and are interested in commercializing a technology, um, for a number of reasons, an SBIR is a good place to start, and that's by design. Okay, so I wanted to go through the mission statement of the SBIR program. Um, this is to fund a diverse portfolio of startups and small businesses across technology areas and markets to stimulate technological innovation, meet federal research and development needs, and increase commercialization to transition R&D into impact. I wanted to focus in on uh, a couple points here or words. First is diverse. Um, the goal of all these agencies is to include companies from a broad geographical area with founders from broad backgrounds that are doing diverse technologies. They're not looking to fund the same thing over and over and over again. They want different approaches um, to solving technical problems. So as you approach this, and this is really true of any federal grant, be thinking about what sets you apart. You're not just applying for funds. Hey, I'm doing something cool. You need to be doing something different that the conventional financing has not necessarily tackled by this point. So there should be a reason for that. You have an innovative idea. You're different in some way from your competitors. There needs to be a differentiator. The second thing that I wanted to focus on is small businesses. This is a requirement. So this is all trained at small businesses from garage scale up until maybe like 100 employees. You can see sbir.gov for definitions of what a small business is. But they do fund, people at garage scale. So like single person companies receive funding every year through this program. That is part of the goal to kind of get people innovating and into the technology pipeline. All right, the third thing is technological innovation. Again, innovation is key. This is defined differently at all agencies, and I will touch on that a little bit. Um, the SBIR program is an architecture, program architecture that all of these different agencies can attend. But they all have kind of their different spin on how they run their individual SBIR program. So I'll be talking a little bit about um, the way that the different agencies view this program, and how to write an application based on that. Okay, the fourth thing is federal R&D needs. These projects are all responsive to some identified technological needs. So the staff at the agencies will solicit projects on technology areas that are priorities. All right, and this is going to be published. They're looking for uh, projects on this, that, and the other. You need to be responsive to that. Um, at different agencies, they may have up to a couple hundred technology areas um, in their SBIR program each year. So, there's a really broad diversity of things you can apply for. Uh, if you're developing some sort of technology, there's probably an SBIR for you, but you do need to respond to the way that they phrase the technical problem. The fifth thing is commercialization. I wanted to touch on that because that really is part of the goal of the SBIR program. It's not just that you're developing technology, is that you're developing economies around these technologies. So a success for the agency or for the SBIR program is if you take their dollars and marshal them towards some economically profitable venture. They want to see you use the funding to really push you to the next phase of technological development and start flying on your own. Is there a slide for the points you're covering now? Is everybody able to see my slide? I'm just reading off of the SBIR history and background slide right now. All right, cool. You can see. Okay, yeah. So that is a win for the agency if you develop the technology and then if you take it and do something with it. They want to see business starts. They want to see economic growth. Those are all really positive things. And then the last thing is impact. Uh, Transitioning R&D into impact. That's going to be defined a little bit differently at each of these agencies. But they not only in your application do they want to hear about what are you doing in your project, which only may be like a year long or something like that. They want to hear about, okay, this technology goes the distance and is applied broadly across the economy. What impacts is it going to have? Will it reduce missed school days for children? Will it reduce missed work days for people that have a certain type of kidney disease? Those things are beyond your ability, of course, to measure when you're doing your project, but it's important for the agency to hear your perspective about how you think this might benefit the economy at large um, further down the line. All right. Can you expand on where we can find the federal research and development needs? Yeah, I'll definitely get into that. Okay. So project format. Again, the SBIR programs are a common project architecture in which each agency solicits projects addressing its specific gaps that it's identified. Your proposal must be responsive administratively and technically. So, they're going to set the groundwork for how much funding and you apply for, how many dollars, what is the length of time, and then, more abstract things like the technological maturity and stuff like that. That's what I mean by administrative. You need to pay attention to all those things and respond to them uh, to assure the government that you're meeting all of those requirements. And then obviously technically, um, you can't do a project on kidney disease at the Department of Energy where they're asking for solar cells to be developed. You need to respond to them technically and have something that meets the needs. All of these things will be published by the agency in a solicitation every year. Some agencies have more than one. We'll talk about that. But there will be a document that you can refer to find all these requirements. Okay, and then as far as the actual project itself, the SBIRs are three-phase projects. So phase one is the first thing you'll apply for. That's a concept phase. Usually about 6 to 12 months, depending on the agency. It can be up to about $275,000 for that, maybe 1 year project. And the idea is it's really a proof of concept. So you should be demonstrating that there's promise in the technology you're developing throughout your phase one project and setting yourself up to apply for and win the phase two, which is a follow-on project, usually like 750,000 to $2 million for 1 to 2 years. Um, and that's to move the project further on toward commercialization. There is a phase three, which is commercialization. There is no funding required by Congress to be allocated to phase three. So phase three is less common. Um, what it really is a tool for the agencies to extend their IP protections from phases one and two into your phase three project. So what I mean by this is since this is all oriented toward small businesses, it's highly protective of your intellectual property. It's non-dilutive funding, and um, there's no ceding any of the IP to the government. So very strong IP protections. That isn't necessarily the case in lots of other federal grant programs. So what phase three really does is allow any of these agencies to get dollars to you under the SBIR umbrella, which is very protective of your intellectual property rights. Less common, I think, you won't see solicitations come out for a phase three. You'll have been working with the agency for a couple of years by that point, and it'll be clear when it's time to apply for a phase three. Lastly, there is also something that, you might read about a phase zero. Some of the agencies are doing this themselves, and then some states are funding phase zero programs. This is really kind of a way of helping like first time applicants um, get the ball rolling on their application, hone their application, and get into the SBIR universe. So it's not the SBIR itself, it's kind of like a pre-program that you can use. Um, and in many cases, I think they are really beneficial. All right. Okay, so flavors of SBIR. There is the kind of vanilla SBIR, which is a type of award, a Small Business Innovation Research Award. Um, the key uh, the key feature of that is that 2/3 of the effort has to be done by the small business. So uh, you can have subcontractors, you can have vendors, you could have a university working with you. If you're applying for an SBIR, at least 2/3 of the effort has to be done by the small business. What that really means is that 2/3 of the money has to go to the small business in the project. There is also kind of a different flavor of SBIR that you can apply for called an STTR or Small Business Technology Transfer. Um, the key feature of that is that 40% at a minimum has to be done by the small business and 30% by a research institution, which is usually going to be a nonprofit hospital, a university, a nonprofit lab or a national lab, some sort of nonprofit researching institution like that. This was created really in response to professors winning SBIR projects and then buying themselves out of teaching time at America's universities. And I think so. This is a little bit of the federal government meeting the universities in their need to keep professors engaged. So it's just a way to get some of these dollars to, um, folks that are working at a university or a nonprofit hospital. Um, and in a lot of solicitations, you'll see they will specify you can apply for this topic as an SBIR, as an STTR, or both. So in many cases, it will be up to you. But they will say, okay, an SBIR and STTR agreements can be either grants or contracts. In a grant, the leader of the project is going to do their best to complete research and achieve basically a desired research outcome. Um, by contrast, a contract is much more demanding in terms of the final deliverable. An agency that would issue an SBIR as a contract rather than a grant is looking probably to procure a good or service that will be of direct benefit to the government. So, in other words, um, Maybe they're soliciting some technology that doesn't exist yet, and they want to be the user of the technology. Think the Department of Defense a lot of time does contracts, so they might have a specific technological need that they want to use next year. They want a widget designed, and they want to use it next year or the year after. With another agency like the National Science Foundation, they're more likely to issue grants. Less of an immediate outcome in terms of the output, more kind of basic research um, in the grants. I'll go through which agencies issue which, and a lot of them do both as well. There is a direct to phase two or a DP2, sometimes called a fast track um, option. So in these cases, agencies have made the determination that they're likely to issue phase two awards on their phase ones. Um, and so it basically is an administrative shortcut for them to say you can apply just at once to go phase one and phase two. You don't have to stop and potentially pause your research and development after phase one, apply for phase two, have that gap. Um, so you can just kind of like roll straight from one into the other. In those cases, you're still doing two different projects. That's a congressional requirement. Um, so you need to meet the goals of the phase one in the phase one. That is a stage gate. If you meet it, then you'll roll straight into phase two. You won't have to do another application. There are technology transfer opportunities. These are mostly issued by the Department of Energy. And basically, what they are is technologies that have been developed at the national labs or some constituent or participant with the Department of Energy that they have an interest in somebody developing. So they may like hand some sort of technology out through the SBIR program just to solicit small businesses in the country to see like what can you do with this. Um, Less common, but you do see those. Um, and then lastly, there are open topics. So there are some opportunities that won't stipulate any area of technology or provide any technology prompt. It's just, what are your innovative ideas around solar energy or something like that? Very non-specific and broad. Um, in general, I kind of guide people away from applying for those unless they've had some contact with the agency and the agency is expecting the application. In most cases, nobody's really going to be watching that folder on the agency side unless they know someone's going to apply there. So nobody really like has a sense of ownership, I think, and you just have better luck going with the prompted technology areas. Okay, the participating agencies: Department of Agriculture, Commerce, Defense, Education, Energy, Health and Human Services. Health and Human Services includes um, the FDA and the NIH and the CDC. So three different kind of big agencies under that umbrella. Again, the Centers for Disease Control, the National Institutes of Health, and the Food and Drug Administration, all under Health and Human Services. Uh, Next, the Department of Homeland Security, the Department of Transportation, the Environmental Protection Agency, NASA, and then the National Science Foundation. And I've shown here who does grants and who does contracts. This should be some kind of preliminary indication to you if you're developing some out there technology that's not going to be ready for 10 years, probably going to fall under the grant category. If you're working on something that may be used within the next few years, generally that's going to be a contract or contracting agency. Obviously, some exceptions to every rule there. So don't take it as gospel, but that is kind of like the general feel that I have from working with SBIRs over time. In terms of how much money is spent on these are the most recent statistics that I found published. Um, but around $3.75 billion every year. This is in 2019. Um, the Department of Defense, by far the biggest. So, they're going to issue a few opportunities per year. Those are going to come out from each of the components individually: the Air Force, the Navy, the Army, and then also any office that's part of the DoD can and does issue um, its own SBIR. So you'll see solicitations coming out from the defense health agencies, um, from the defense intelligence agencies. So all these constituent institutions are participating individually. There is a one website where you can find all the information on the DoD opportunities. So that's probably by this point closer to $2 billion a year. Um, and these are all, remember, I mean, these projects are, 100 to 275,000 for phase one. So um, if you imagine about $2 billion, that's quite a lot of SBIRs that's being issued every year. Um, so Department of Health and Human Services, again, the CDC, FDA, and IIH, that's probably closer now to $1.25 billion per year. Also a huge, huge program. Drops down a little bit after that. The Department of Energy, uh, they also issue from different offices within their department. So you will see, the broad agency announcement from the Department of Energy itself, and then separately the ARPA-E announcements, which is kind of like their moonshot type projects, a little bit further out in terms of technological maturity. The National Science Foundation, 212 million. I know that that's grown. The National Science Foundation does SBIR projects on a really wide range of topics. So a lot of people look to that as first-time applicants to kind of get enrolled um, in the federal funding universe. NASA at around 200 million, and then it drops down again. The Department of Ag, Homeland Security, that's grown. That is a relatively new SBIR program. Um, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, the Department of Education, Department of Transportation, National Institute of Standards and Technology, which is part of Commerce, and the EPA. So the EPA, notice as we're getting down to these agencies, these are pretty small. So, they may only be doing like 15 phase ones per year. These are programs that are just going to issue one solicitation per year um, for the most part. And yeah, so the purpose of this slide is to give you some sense of like where you should be looking, which agencies have the most funding activity. Obviously, in terms of other federal grants, all of these agencies have a lot more going on. These are just going to be their small business oriented grant programs. All right. In terms of success rates, about 17% across the entire SBIR programs for phase one applicants. Um, so if you think about that, it's 1 in 5. I think it's that can sound discouraging, but keep in mind that a lot of people aren't going to meet those administrative requirements of the grant. It won't be completely um, filled out as it's required, or they'll have some mistakes, apply for the wrong amount of money, um, basic stuff like that. So I think you can get a huge leg up here if you, number one, fill out the grant application properly, and then number two, have some contact with the agency. We'll talk more about that later, but having the agencies uh, interested in your application, expecting it to come in, and aware of you can go a long way. Those conversations just are really huge in terms of understanding a little bit more deeply than what's in the solicited project prompt. All right, so about 17% for phase ones, and then about 60% success rate for phase two applications. Um, and yeah, the reason for that is phase two applicants know, whether or not they're likely to win. They've been working with the agency for a while at that point, working with the program manager at the agency, and have a good sense of the direction of the project. All right, I'm gonna take a few. I think there are a couple questions here. Um, we touched on that a little bit. When your business plan falls under authority of several agencies, which one do you apply to, or do you apply to all? So, yeah, that's a good question. I think uh, you apply to the one that has the highest likelihood of success first. That's where you want to put your energy. And again, you can get a sense of that by um, talking with the agency. I'll talk in the next few slides, I'll get a little bit more into that, but you can apply at multiple agencies at once. What you absolutely positively cannot do is do the same project for multiple agencies. So if you are found to be like double dipping or receiving dollars from two different agencies to do the same work, um, then that's really bad. You can go to jail for that. But it's unlikely. I think in any kind of R&D effort, there are lots of little problems that are embodied. And I always encourage, especially first time applicants, to think pretty small in terms of how much you want to take on in a phase one. It should be like a punchy experiment, or a series of experiments that really gets to the core um, technology and provides the minimal basis for encouraging the government to spend more. You don't want to solve all the problems of the world in a phase one that's biting off too much. So you're going to end up with a pretty compact work plan, okay, that shouldn't do too much. That makes it also um, easy to differentiate from other things. So a lot of people do work for multiple agencies at the same time. They'll just kind of isolate different parts of the problem they're working on and work with the different agencies about multiple things. All right. And then, okay, a slide on agencies and funding levels. I think these slides hopefully will be distributed. You're welcome to them. I hope they're sent out to you. And so I don't need to belabor this. Um, it's really straightforward. It's just how much each of the agencies are spending. Um, I do want to call your attention though to the cycles per year. So notice that at a lot of these bigger agencies, they're going to have continuous or multiple cycles per year. So what I mean by this is at the USDA, you've got one chance per year. Department of Commerce, you've got one. At the DoD, there are going to be three big cycles per year. So three big opportunities with like all the big constituent branches, Army, Navy, Air Force. Um, and then also miscellaneous out of cycle opportunities, those opportunities from the smaller um, agencies within the DoD. So there's stuff coming out all the time. You need to monitor the pages if you want to participate with an agency like this. The DoD, or sorry, the DOE, Energy has two per year. And then NSF, the National Science Foundation, who really makes an effort to be like user friendly for first time applicants. Um, they have continuous applications, so you can apply any day of the year for an NSF SBIR. Um, and yeah, so total funding. This is actually a more recent number. I think this is like 2022. 3.9 billion um, per year. About 12% of that was STTRs and 88% on SBIRs. So obviously much higher allocation toward the SBIR projects. All right. So how do you get started? This is where I'm going to get into like identifying the opportunities and where you need to go to do that. So the first thing I think is to have your technology in mind. Go to the SBIR Award Data Archive. Okay, that's at sbir.gov. This URL right here. SBIR.gov is not the SBIR program. Uh, the SBIR programs are run by each of the individual agencies. SBIR.gov is a website owned by the Small Business Administration that collects information about all the SBIR programs. So it's kind of like a clearinghouse for what all these different agencies are doing in their SBIR programs. The award archive is super helpful. So you can go back to like the year 2000, I think, and get information on what was funded by each of these different agencies. Um, most of them provide only like an abstract worth of information. So you'll be able to see um, the year, the location of the awardee, the dollar value of the award, the title of the award, and then maybe like a 250 or 500 word abstract on what was done in the project. Um, so I think that's really helpful. You won't get to see the application or any of the results of the project, but it gives you a really, really good feeling for like where these agencies are allocating their dollars on what types of problems, um, and also how they think about the different problems. So you can start to look at the vocabulary that they use, um, for the people that are awarded. And yeah, I think that goes a long way toward helping you get funding. This is, hint, hint, a really good way of understanding. Okay, the USDA has a technology prompt on, um, on cows and on pigs. They're soliciting projects for both, but you might look at this and say, wow, they spent 85% of those dollars on pigs last year. Maybe a pig project is a bit more appropriate place to apply because I have a higher likelihood of success. Uh, so this is kind of an initial pass at understanding some of those things. Obviously, your communication with the agency, talking with the program managers there, is going to give you a much better sense, but this gives you a baseline for understanding that. The second webpage I've got here is NIH Reporter, and that is a clearinghouse of all National Institutes of Health funding, SBIR and otherwise. So it's got a lot of information. Um, and Yeah, I highly encourage you to look at that if you're working in the health sciences. Um, okay, and then review the schedules. So I just kind of put something up on the board about the schedules, how frequently they go per year. SBIR.gov does have a solicitation calendar, to show you when everything's due for each of the agencies. I'm going to admonish you, though, that that is not authoritative. Each of the uh, individual agencies are authoritative on their own programs. So you can get a good sense from looking at the calendar at sbir.gov, but you do need to go to the agency's website and follow the agency instructions. And they can and do like delay their due dates all the time for whatever reason. That's not necessarily going to be registered on the sbir.gov website very quickly, if at all. So just know that once you identify the agency you want to work with, that's your spot for all the information. Um, Okay, review specific solicitations and identify topics of interest. So at this point, you've identified an agency. You're going to be going to that agency's website for their SBIR programs, grabbing their solicitation, and reading through and understanding. Am I doing anything with my business that can tackle any of these technology areas that they've solicited work on? Um, so once you really identify, uh, where you want to work, or a program of interest and a topic of interest that you'd like to apply to, um, start developing in your own mind a preliminary project plan. What will you do in phase one? How will that satisfy the requirements of the technology prompt in the solicitation? Um, and then as it's allowed, you're going to do outreach to the agency with that in your back pocket. Pay attention to the solicitations, the oriented, the security oriented um, institutions do have more strict rules around what communication you can have. So the Department of Defense has open windows during which you're allowed to contact program staff, and specific topics that you're allowed to discuss with them. And then all those discussions are made public. Um, if there's anything substantive, I think they'll publish it for everyone's benefit, so that nobody can get a competitive advantage um, from that contact. But you need to really, really be aware of what the requirements are, so that you're not putting any of the program staff in an awkward position. You don't want to call them up and ask a question they can't answer. Um, but yeah, what you should be looking for in this call is like, hey, I've got this idea for a project. I think it can meet this topic that you've solicited. What do you think? Is that something that you're likely to fund? I wouldn't ask them that directly, but talk to them and see where the conversation goes. uh, and then meanwhile, you're working on all of your registrations and requirements to be able um, to apply for the SBIR. Okay. Question. What I want to do usually tackles all the LARDA or the UN's 10 posted goals for climate resolutions. Um, yeah, I think if those goals are consistent with what's solicited by the agencies, then you've got a high likelihood of success. Okay. So this is just a little bit deeper on identifying a topic of interest or program of interest. And I've just got links here to each of the pages, so you can visit the different agency websites that are going to have again information on uh, what you can apply for and where. And actually, I'll I'll stop here and just show you one of them as an example because I think it might help to look. Let's see. Okay, so let's take the NSF. In 1 second, I'll share my screen here once I get this pulled up. Okay. Okay. Hopefully everybody can see my screen again. This is the NSF SBIR website. It's called seedfund.nsf.gov. They've rebranded their SBIR program, the Seed Fund. I think that's, user friendly. They're trying to attract new applicants. So in any case, that's what they call it. The portfolio page is where they identify all the areas of technological interest. So these are all the technologies that NSF is funding this year. And so let's just click on one, artificial intelligence. Okay, so they've got a brief synopsis of, their perspective on artificial intelligence. All right, you're going to read this and then all of these subtopics. So when you go to apply, you're going to identify a subtopic. Cognitive science-based technologies, computer vision-based AI technologies. These are all topics to which you can apply for an SBIR program. Okay, so you're responding to the need here. At um, other agencies from the NSF, they're going to be much more specific a lot of the time in terms of what they're applying for. At the Department of Energy, they may ask for, solar cells using a specific chemistry with a goal of meeting a certain solar efficiency or something like that. So um, very much more specific. If you think about the National Science Foundation, it has an extremely broad remit. It's to do science that obviously overlaps with a lot of the other agencies in all these different areas. So um, the NSF keeps things very broad in order to avoid stepping on other agency toes, and they view all these technologies as being uh, in a lot of cases a little bit further off. So they tend to work on slightly more basic science with a more academic perspective on things, I would say, than some of the other agencies. Okay, and then two folks are identified here. These are the program directors for the artificial intelligence topic of the NSF SBIR program. So look, they've got their email right here. You can reach out to them. The NSF is extremely open about communication. Uh, and so these are people who it would be appropriate to contact and talk with them about, a prospective application. What are they looking for in the language-based AI technologies? What does that mean? What are you looking to fund? I think I have something that could meet that need. That's the uh, conversation you'd be having with them. Uh, Likewise at all the other agencies. So they're going to identify someone, if they do allow contact, they'll identify someone you can contact. That will be somebody who has some sense of the technology, has a background in the technology area, uh, and can speak with you on those terms. All right. And then let me see if I can pull up another one here just to kind of provide another example. I am going to go for, uh, actually, let's do the Department of Defense. That is popular one. Oh, all right, here we go. Okay, so this is the Department of Defense. I actually have these out of turn in the slides, so that I did list the Department of Energy by accident under the defense. Uh, it'll be obvious when you click on the website. Um, okay, but yeah, DoD SBIR STTR.mil, and you can see this list. Boom, active solicitations. There are 37 topics active. Okay, this is their solicitation schedule for the year into 25. So this is their fiscal year. Um, and let's click here on topics and see where that takes us. Okay, so here are topics that are currently open for the DoD. You can click to expand them. So miniaturization of hyperspectral sensors for UAS applications. It's a mouthful. Um, but this is the technology topic. So they're soliciting right here a very specific technology. They're telling you what you want in this objective description, what they want you to do in phase one. Again, this is going to be a contracting agency for the most part, so very specific in terms of what they want you to produce in phase one. Um, okay, and they do, I believe, let's see, they have a staff person listed. If I click in here, uh, all right, hopefully everybody can see this. So I'm still on the same page. I've opened up their document. They don't list a point of contact for this one. So the majority of them will list a technical point of contact. This one actually does not. Um, so I guess you're on your own for this one. Um, okay. Uh, but back to the solicitation page. I do want to call out a couple things. So they've got this, these documents that you do need to download and review. I would cite the references in your application. They think that this is important for you to read, so you need to read it. You need to refer to it, and then here are the questions and answers. So as folks submit questions to this, um, they're going to publish it again for everybody's benefit, uh, and you'll be able to see. So just know that if you put in a question, other people are going to be able to view it. All right. And then let's just look at one last one. I am going to take a look at the DOE here. All right. And this is the DOE page. Okay, so they've got their future SBIR opportunities, their current and their closed ones. So you can go back and look at the old topics. But all the information is right here in this table. This is when the opportunity is released. They're going to have a webinar where they'll talk you through the topics, and then you can click these topics documents to find all the information you want on any of the topics they're soliciting. So again, this is the Department of Energy. They're going to have, some contracts probably they'll have much more specific um, requirements in terms of what they're asking you to investigate. For example, here, um, don't need to read through it at this point, but they do get pretty specific in terms of the technology prompt. They have a contact person, okay, and then all these references again. They're going to tell you how much money can you apply for this. Are you accepting SBIRs and STTRs? Okay, so it's going to be a different format at all these agencies, but all the information is going to be there. And these are the things that you need to be looking at. All right. So I am going to go back now to the presentation, and we will pick up where we left off. Screen share. Okay. Presenter view. Okay, got it. So hopefully everybody can see my screen again. Um, all right. Uh, so getting started on the registrations, these are kind of the prerequisites to winning an award. You need to first have a formed business, so it needs to exist legally. So create your business. It can be different business structures. Um, they'll award uh, SBIRs to different types of businesses, um, as long as they're for profit and small businesses. Um, Obtain an EIN. So you need a taxpayer ID or an EIN number for your business. You need to, exist um, in the IRS's eyes. Um, Obtain a unique entity identifier. This is transitioning from DUNS. If any of you have done projects in the past or had a small business in the past, you may be familiar with the DUNS number. It's kind of like an identifying number for each small business. So you can create a unique entity identifier, and then that will be, just a number that the government and these different agencies can use to refer to your business specifically, understand if you're delinquent on any taxes, accused of a crime, any of those types of things. Just ties the business all together. Um, all right, and then register at sbir.gov. You do need to register at sbir.gov. That is where you will be validated as a small business. So when you go to actually apply, you'll have to go to sbir.gov, log in, and print off it's a one-page PDF that just says it's June 13th, and yes, this is a small business. It exists today. Um, it's just a certificate that you have to give. Uh, Register at the System for Award Management, or SAM.gov. Um, SAM.gov is a clearinghouse for federal award management. So it has functions related to like applications as well as communications, things like that. So you can create um, an account there and go in and identify different um, opportunities, and then have like a workspace for each where you exchange files around them, or even communications with the agency. Grants.gov and search. I'd say grants.gov is the one that most of the agencies are going to use for you to actually apply. So when you go to apply, um, you more likely than not will use grants.gov. Um, Although some agencies have their own systems, but grants.gov allows you to navigate to a specific opportunity, click it, and say, yes, I want to apply. And then it'll pop up with a workspace, which is basically a series of fillable forms and fields where you can upload documents that you're created that are going to comprise your application. Uh, uh, that happens for a lot of agencies in grants.gov. Um, Not all. Some of them have their own. The NSF still has one from like 1993 or something like that that they use that still works pretty well. Um, but yeah, all of this will be in the solicitation. So once you identify your agency, it'll be clear to you which websites you need to register for. Um, and in many cases, there may be some specific agency websites. Keep in mind that if you're doing something security oriented, like for the Department of Homeland Security, or the Department of Defense, or the Department of Energy, um, they might have some extra steps that you need to take, um, to kind of clear yourself security wise. Not any of them are terribly onerous, but I would jump on all these things well ahead of time. You don't want to be doing this the night before your grant is due, because all these websites need to communicate with one another. Um, the grants.gov is going to like ping sam.gov to make sure your company exists and to import all the information about your company. That may take a little while in some cases. So just get all this stuff out of the way, and then you're not worrying about it. This applies to all federal grants too. Do these things early so that you don't have to worry about it. All right. Okay, so at this stage, I did want to touch a little bit more in depth on agency outreach. I spoke briefly about that, but if there's anything that you take home from today, I hope that this is one thing that I really am able to kind of drive home. Uh, it's important to know the agency and what they're looking for. Okay, don't just read the solicitation and the technology prompt and think that you totally understand it. When you're allowed to, it's really, really highly advisable to have some communication with the agency. Uh, you don't want to start things off on a bad foot by not knowing enough when you reach out to them. So I suggest you have a strong command of the solicitation, that when it's due, what you're going to apply for. Is it phase one, phase two? Well, you can't apply directly for a phase two unless they offer a directive phase two. But what type of project you're applying for? Is it an SBIR, STTR? Um, what technology prompt? And then you should have done a lot of thinking about what they're soliciting in terms of the technology and how you're going to meet that. So, in other words, they've stated a problem, you're delivering a solution, but you need to explain to them why it's a solution and how it's addressing the problem that they've identified. Okay. Um, and be able to do that with kind of a preliminary description of what you would propose to do in the phase one. So, okay, you want to develop, uh, a new rocket technology. Well, what are you going to do in phase one to prove to me that that's a promising avenue of development? Are you just going to do some test tube chemistry on these different rocket fuels? Are you going to, get out there on a test stand and do some experiments? Or are you going to do simulations? And, regardless, what is all this going to tell us? That leads us into phase two. Um, Again, you should have a very compact, kind of well thought out um, phase one approach. Uh, that's demonstrative that the technology is a promising investment for the government, and be able to talk about that. Uh, I usually suggest asking for a call, so emailing them first. Um, and getting them to set aside some time. Hey, can I call you on the 13th? And I just like to talk with you for 15, 20 minutes about, this project. I'm a prospective applicant to your solicitation, and I'd like to get your take on it. Then they set aside some time. It's in their calendar. They're not caught off guard. They're already thinking about, oh, this person wants to talk about the SBIRs. So they're going to be ready to talk about that. A lot of these staff, they're wearing multiple hats. They might be managing the SBIR programs, but if you think about like the Defense Health Agency, a lot of the time they may be a healthcare provider or a researcher, um, that's got their own stuff going on, and then on the side they're kind of managing a batch of SBIR projects. They put in a topic this year, so you know make sure that they're like in that way of thinking by getting a call or arranged if you can, if it's permissible. Some agencies, again, the DoD sometimes only allows email, but I usually like phone calls. People are also a little bit more loose on the phone, so they might not be as hyper vigilant about like not putting something in writing that could get them in trouble later. Not that they're going to tell you anything that would give you a real competitive advantage, but I think there's a level of comfort on the phone. So that's my recommendation. Okay, so yeah, be sure to follow all of the instructions. You definitely don't want to ask somebody a question they can't answer. That's just gonna, make it awkward for them. So yeah, be thinking of how they're gonna receive your inquiries. Refer to the solicitation. They might not know exactly which topic you're talking about, so just start with the basics. Hey, I'm a prospective applicant to this cycle. It's due in 3 months. This is the specific technology area that I'd like to apply for. Here's what I'm proposing to do. Um, be able to talk them again through your work plan and how it responds to the solicitation. And then just don't be too rigid. They might have suggestions. Um, they might say, hey, I hear you. That's a cool idea, but what if you thought a little bit more about this? That should be a strong indication to you that, they're interested in funding it if you, heed some of their uh, kind of unspoken advice, and maybe look at the problem in a little different way. They also may refer you to other technology prompts. So they may say, oh, I see why you read my uh, technology area statement and wanted to apply here, but I really think if you apply under this other technology area, you might have more success. I know the program manager over there really likes the type of stuff that you're doing. So be open to feedback. All right, this could go anywhere. Just don't be offended if they have different ideas. Uh, listen to them and be thinking about what gives you the best chance of being funded. All right. Okay, so any questions right now before we get into? I'm going to go through kind of like what are the uh, parts of an application, but it's maybe a good time to stop for questions if there are any. I'm going to take 1 minute to get coffee. I'll turn my screen off, but um, you can shout questions out. I'll listen or type them in the chat here, and I'll be back in just one second. All right. So yeah, if there are no questions, I will just jump back into it. Let me share my screen again here. You go. Okay, down to forming content. Okay, so maybe I did get a question here. Uh, okay, interesting. Um, okay, so forming content of the application. They may be structured a little bit differently, agency to agency, but for the most part, there's going to be a cover page with all the front matter with your brief abstract. That's going to be maybe 200, 500 words, something like that. A summary of your project. And then there's going to be the technical volume, which is the narrative piece of this. The technical volume is going to have different components. The first is specific aims. This may be called project objectives, specific aims, uh, different phraseology at different agencies. But basically, this is the goal of your phase one project. What are you going to do? What will you get done in 12 months? That's going to have this great, bearing on this technology problem. Um, and then scientific background. This is where you should be referring again to those publications that others have provided for you in the technology prompts. You should be referring to the current science in the field. Um, you need to make it really clear that you are aware of what's going on in this technology space, aware of the research, if it's a very academic area, or aware of the industry, if it's not. And, use citations. So if you have, a technology that's kind of at odds with, an alternative, um, the race for AC and DC power comes to mind. If you're proposing for AC power and you think that others are going to be applying for DC, tell them why AC is better. This is your scientific background, where you're saying why your approach works. Um, and you lead them there with references to the science. The commercialization plan. So uh, this is kind of the reason for the SBIR program existing. Different agencies, again, view it differently all these years down the road. But in all cases, it is a requirement that they need to be investing dollars into things that will grow as a business. So you won't necessarily be required to do a formal commercialization plan in phase one. You may just have to write a paragraph about it. In phase two, you definitely will have to have a formal plan. Um, and some agencies have uh, more in their phase one applications. So yeah, this is where you're talking about your business approach, how much money you can make, what the addressable market is, how you'll uh, approach the market and get the technology out there. So do some thinking about that. All right, you're not just doing the R&D, you're thinking about where the rubber hits the road in terms of the technology. Your work plan. So your work plan is going to be, tasks. What are you actually going to do in phase one? And I'll talk a little bit about select of these items uh, a little in a few slides. Um, and then works cited against. So you need to be referring to the literature or whatever publications are out there. I always like a good tip is to refer to agency publications. So, the National Science Foundation, National Institutes of Health all have published statistics and statements about these different technological needs, the mission of the agency. So if you can refer to an agency goal, um, then that's great. You're letting the agency make your case for you. Okay, so the budget, um, you know, it's pretty straightforward budget. If you want to go into more detail there, we can, but it doesn't need to be too complicated at this stage. Um, the team section, any sub-award agreements or letters of commitment from subs. So if you're using a university as a sub, um, and then a data management plan, so like an IP management plan that says how you'll archive and protect data. And then lastly, you may get an opportunity to suggest reviewers or um, conversely to torpedo other reviewers that you don't want reviewing your project. Uh, Works differently at different agencies, but a lot of the agencies, um, the uh, the applications will go to outside reviewers, so people that have been invited to review impartially on the agency's behalf from industry throughout the country. So these are going to be usually people with PhDs that are active researching in these fields. Um, so you can suggest someone that if you want them to review your project in a lot of cases. All right. And my recommendation here is just get organized early. You can make yourself a table like this that lists out all the different components of the application, um, how long they are. These are all going to have different word or page count limits. So it really helps to make a map of this where you can say, oh, this is 200 words, this is 100 words, and then it all needs to fit into one page. All right. So those 200 words are counted within this one page limit, all that sort of stuff. Um, get yourself organized or else it's going to be a huge mess. I mean, all of these documents have like sub documents that you're going to load in. And then I usually use in my tables like a stoplight system. So like, red if I haven't touched it, yellow if I'm working on it, and then green if it's done and ready to be uploaded. All right. So keep yourself organized. The tone and style of your application. Uh, okay. So in general, there's a storytelling aspect to this. You're telling the story that um, there's this technology that can have a big impact on the technological need that's been identified by the agency. You need the government to kick in a small amount of money, basically as seed funding, and that will move the whole enterprise forward, and economic and technological development will follow. um, that's the story you're telling. uh, it's innovative, it's different, it's high risk. It's good and okay to be high risk at a lot of these agencies. That's why it's appropriate for the federal government to be funding things. um, if it were a very low risk, easy idea, um, you know, incumbents in the field would already be doing it. They would just do it. So you've got something innovative that's high risk, and you need the government to kick in money because other sources haven't provided it. That's less true of the contracting agencies. So the contracting agencies, the story there might just be, the Navy needs this thing to be built. Uh, it doesn't exist in the market, and so they need it. So it's a little bit more cut and dry. Um, but in any case, there's a storytelling aspect. So you just need them to kick in some money, and then you can prove that the technology is efficacious, that you'll use it, and it'll have a big impact on the problem set. Hopefully that makes sense. And then the tone of the application. And this goes, by the way, this goes for a lot of federal applications, not just SBIRs. I am writing about SBIRs here, but a lot of this advice is sort of broadly applicable. Um, Efficiently and often repetitively convey what you want to do, what you will do, and how it will advance the science. So this goes goes for literally any federal or state grant application. Don't be shy about repeating yourself. You want to, if they're soliciting specific things, really hit them over the head with it. So if they say, we're looking for innovative projects that can be 60% solar efficient, um, you know, uh, solar conversion efficiency or something like that, and that you can do it in a year, restate that to them, but do it in your own words to show them that you understand. So you need to say, you know, I'm developing this technology. It can achieve 65% efficiency. I'm on a path to develop this, and I can have it done within your timeline. Um, that's really good because that allows the reviewer who's, in many cases, they're going to be checking boxes. So they're going to look at, do you meet this, that requirement? A, B, C, D, E, F, G. If you have that all in the order that it's asked uh, in the solicitation, and you're very explicit about it, bringing in some keywords to cue the reader, um, it just makes it easy for them to fill out their box checking exercise and for them to say yes. I mean, obviously, there's going to be more narrative and prose involved in some of these sections where you're doing kind of the storytelling aspects, but you need to make it really clear to them that you have understood what they've asked for and are providing what they've asked for. Okay. Think like a teacher. Um, don't assume that even in an agency that everybody knows everything. So, you know, this is probably going to be less true in an agency like the National Institutes of Health, where it's going to be, uh, you know, people who have a research background in these areas that are going to be reviewing the things. Um, but for the most part, somebody reviewing an application from the NSF, they may have a background that's in like an adjacent technology or something like that. So don't overcomplicate it. Think short sentences, 10 to 20 words per sentence. Avoid unnecessary words and keep your paragraphs short and focus to one idea. Just don't make it hard to read. That's the worst thing you can do. Make it really, really highly legible. Um, and again, a lot of these applications, they're going to go in, especially for the SBIRs, it's going to have like three parts of the review. The first is going to be just a robot that says, yeah, they met the page count, they met this, that, and the other. We can review this application. All right. So obviously make sure that you're meeting all those. The second might be the outside reviewers. And those, again, are going to be people from around the country that are aware of this technology area. Um, but think about how they might be spending, their time after their kids have gone to bed. It's 8 p.m. and they've got a stack of 12 SBIR applications to review. Don't make it hard for them. They're going to have a rubric. You need to like address all the items in the rubric and just make sure it's easy for them to follow along, that you're following the architecture of the program. So, or of the solicitation. So, it's going to be clear. They're going to prompt you what themes you need to address, you know, in your commercialization plan. It'll say, uh, what is the size of the addressable market? What is your go-to-market strategy? So in that case, you've got, paragraph 1, the size of the addressable market is. Paragraph 2, my go-to-market strategy is. Just make it easy, okay? Um, so address the front matter to a scientifically literate but non-specialized audience. The background technical discussion R&D plan can be oriented toward reviewers who are more familiar with the specific subject matter. Again, use keywords to cue the reviewers, tell their stories, and then have your own review committee. Leave time uh, for somebody else that you trust to review and to tell you how it flows and get some feedback on your application. Um, the specific games, I won't go. We're running low on time, so I won't go too far into this. But for the NIH, um, there is like a whole uh, academic discipline around writing good specific games. Okay. And I think it's applicable directly to the NIH. Um, but I think it also, if you read some of those materials, it's really, really beneficial for the others too. Um, so take your time. You'll get these slides. Just read through this. Don't take my word for it. There's tons out there, and I've got some some resources listed here. Some of them are government resources, but then there's also like other publications about how to put together your specific aims page. In this case, first paragraph is the hook, second paragraph, the long-term goal of the proposal, objectives to rationale, and the payoff, and then your specific aims. So you're kind of teeing this up. Here's this huge problem. Here's what my goal is, and then here's what I'm going to do in this little short-term project to start chipping away at that problem. And then the final paragraph link back to the mission and the expected long-term outcomes. This is really broadly applicable stuff. Okay, the work plan. Um, your work plan is really kind of the core of the application. It's what you're going to do in the phase one project. Do not get it confused with your whole technological development arc. It's not everything that your company is going to do in the next 2 years. It's what you're going to do in this 1 year project for a phase one. So it may be called different things at different agencies, but um, in all cases, you're focusing on why this is the best approach. Um, you're designing tasks that are going to be easily measured. So your tasks should be time bound. It should be specific. It should be really easy for the contracting agency to know whether or not you succeeded in each of the tasks. Okay, so each of them should be measurable. They should tie directly to your broader aims. So it should be really clear why you're doing each task. I'm doing task A because it meets, my goal of demonstrating I can get to 60% solar efficiency, whatever it is. Um, but make those linkages really explicit. Okay. A knowledgeable reader should be able to review your work plan and get the gist of what you're doing in your project. So everything's contained within this. Um, for phase one, 2 to 5 tasks is usually sufficient. Do not do a whole lot because then they're just going to think you're never going to get this done. You're just going to get stuck on task 3. Um, and really, really limit iteration and dependencies among the tasks. So you should be able to pivot if a task doesn't turn out exactly right, or if it takes longer, you should be able to make headway in the rest of the grant. Gantt charts are a really good tool here. Some agencies require them. I always like to use them, whether they're required or not. Networking letters of support, really important for lots of agencies, especially the grant making agencies rather than the contracts, um, because they're not the eventual user of the technology and don't necessarily work directly with the industry. Um, it behooves you to convince them that there's a market for what you're doing. So uh, in most SBIRs, you'll have a chance to attach maybe 2 to 5 letters of support um, from like third-party people. And in all cases, the letters of support should establish the writer's authority. Who are they? How do they know? What's their position within this industry or technology space? Establish their knowledge of the proposing organization. They know who you are. They know that you're the team to do this, to develop this technology. And then state their future interest. Are they, the president of a hospital group that would use this medical intervention you've got under development? Are they, computer scientists who think it's technologically efficacious, or some other thing? Would they be interested in investing in it if they're, an angel investor or something like that? Good sources for letters include potential customers, investors, collaborators or partners, or scientific experts. Anybody can really speak authoritatively to the technology or its eventual economic impact. I'm going to go kind of quickly here. So team bio sketches, you can review this slide. I mean, basically, the gist of it is you just need to define um, who you've got on your team and explain how they are competent to get the project done. So they need to be number one, technologically competent, number two, administratively competent. Those competencies don't need to be vested within the same personality. So you're putting together a team from parts. That's okay. Just explain it. And then lastly, I just wanted to highlight here a couple other opportunities that I think may be of interest to folks on this call. This is a state program called CalSeed. Um, mostly oriented around like environmental technologies, but like the SBIRs, it's non-dilutive funding um, for small businesses up to I think now it's 650,000 or something like that in a multi-phase program, um, and also involves some like accelerator type stuff. So contact with investors and other folks. I think it was due recently. It comes out once a year, but take a look at that. Um, if you're interested in any of the security agencies, the Department of Defense, the DHS, any of those, take a look at the Joint Interagency Field Experimentation Program. This is basically a field day that is run by uh, one of the defense universities up in Monterey, I think, organizes this. Um, but yeah, so it's a field day. It's often held at Camp Roberts, um, right north of Paso Robles. Um, but they switch around. Sometimes they do it in Monterey. A pretty low barrier to entry. You can apply and for a number of different technology areas, and just go like set up a booth and meet with Department of Defense staff or staff sometimes from other agencies. Um, I think that's really beneficial to get some face time with the agencies. And there are others. If you want to talk more in detail about any others, just let me know. I've got my email address up here. Um, and yeah, we've got a few minutes left. So if there are any questions, I'll field those at this point.